Ladies and gentlemen, would you please stand as American Legion Post 370 presents our colors and remain standing to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and for the invocation, which will be given by the Reverend Dr. Beth A. Mackey.
For the Pledge of Allegiance, veterans, whether actively serving or not, are permitted to salute the flag.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray.
O Lord God Almighty, in whose name the founders of this country won liberty for themselves and for us, and lit the torch of freedom for nations then unborn, grant that we and all the people of this land may have grace to maintain our liberties in righteousness and peace. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. Amen.
Please be seated. Good morning and happy Independence Day. On behalf of Historic New Harmony, the Kiwanis Club, and the Friends of the Working Men's Institute, welcome to our July 4th celebration. Wow, it's another year and it's another full house. It's great to see so many people here today to participate in New Harmony's traditional July 4th program. And we're grateful to be back here in the Athenaeum celebrating for our 10th year. Incidentally, the Athenaeum will be celebrating its 40th anniversary this October. As ever, we thank Historic New Harmony for welcoming us into this magnificent building. The celebration of the 4th of July in New Harmony is rich with meaning and has been since 1814. In letters written to relatives in Germany, the Harmonists expressed their love of America. They were especially excited to learn that in America they could pursue more than one vocation at a time. The people were no longer strapped by social convention. Similarly, the Owenites who settled here after the Harmonists followed suit, praising America for pursuing independent thoughts and ideas, such as free public education and the all-important a woman's right to vote. Indeed, in his first 4th of July address in 1826, Robert Owen observed that not only did the Declaration of Independence secure political liberty, it prepared the way to secure to you mental liberty. And that's a quote. Today, as we modern Rappites gather here, as our community founders gathered, to sing patriotic songs and to hear the Declaration of Independence read in its entirety, to listen to a keynote speech followed by our famous golf cart parade and community picnic, may we remember what this national holiday is truly about. It's about liberty, precious, hard-won liberty, and justice for all. New Harmony, let the celebration begin. It is my pleasure to introduce the community choir under the direction of Mrs. Tina Schutte.
Good morning. What a treasure this community choir is. I hope you all realize that there aren't many towns, especially many towns this size, that have a choir of this caliber and this commitment. So, if you'll look on the program, this isn't strictly a performance. This is actively engaging you all. Two of the songs, we have the words on the back, and we hope that you'll join in singing them. The first two numbers that we're going to do are the salute to the armed forces. And we ask that if you have served in any branch of the armed forces, that when we come to your anthem, that you stand so that we can recognize and thank you for your service. The second song that we're going to sing is God Bless America, and there's an opportunity for you all to sing along with us, and I'll bring you in. I think you all know the words. So without further ado, I present the New Harmony Community Choir.
The United States Army.
The United States Marines.
The United States Navy.
United States Coast Guard.
The United States Air Force. Please stand and join us in singing the national anthem.
All
July 4th, 1776, Congress approved the Declaration of Independence, and then further ordered that copies of the Declaration be sent to several assemblies, conventions, and committees or councils of safety, and to the several commanding officers of the Continental troops, that it be proclaimed in each of the United States and at the head of the Army. Let us listen as working man, Mr. Curt Schmitt, proclaims our Declaration of Independence to us.
Thanks, everybody. The unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America, July 4, 1776. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience have shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation until his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he is utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions from within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for that purpose obstructing laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to law for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for their tenures of their office and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefit of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into the colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coast, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive on the high seas, to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must, therefore, acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assembled appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. And that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
How about that, ladies and gentlemen? Good morning. My name is Nathan Maudlin, also of the Working Men's Institute. It's my honor and privilege to introduce our guest speaker today, Honorable James Marion Redwine. Judge Redwine is a veteran of the U.S. Air Force. He graduated from the Indiana School of Law in 1970, and he recently retired as judge in Posey County after 38 years. He is also the author of 5 books, the new one coming out this year called Unanimous for Murder. It's a historical novel. Can't wait to hear it. He's a movie director and producer. He authors regular articles in our local newspapers. He's married to Margaret Ann Redwine. We call her Pig. During his time on the bench, Judge Redwine worked to encourage parties to settle or mediate their disputes. Like Abraham Lincoln, Judge Redwine believes that disputes should be settled out of court where the parties can play an active role in structuring an agreement. Judge Redwine introduced the concept of mediation to judges in the Ukraine when he was part of a teaching delegation there. Judge Redwine also celebrated Law Day each year, May 1st or around May 1st. He would invite students from the local county high schools to conduct a mock trial. And the mock trial included witnesses, cross-examination, objections, and a jury. The students were remarkable. If you ever have a chance to see it, you should. But before each mock trial, Judge Redwine would explain to everyone present where Law Day comes from. He told us that Law Day was President Eisenhower's response to the May Day celebrations in the former Soviet Union. On May Day in the Soviet Union, there was a parade of military weapons and missiles and military artillery. They were paraded through the Red Square. The judge explained that Law Day is our American celebration that we are a country of laws and that we strive for justice under the law. Thank you, Judge, for telling us that. I introduce the Honorable James Marion Redwine.
Good morning. Nathan and Jeannie are good friends, but I noticed they put me after a really great speech. Thanks anyway. Thank you, Nathan and Jeannie, and thank you all for being here. This will be a fairly short speech. Maybe you'll think not short enough, but you do have an insurance policy. Some members of my family are here, and they didn't come for the speech. They've heard me before. happened, and you may hear it, I hope not, when my sister and my brother and my other brother and I all sang in our church choir, the organist, who was our minister's daughter, Max was a good minister, but a little loquacious. And when he ran on long, Judy would begin to softly play the introduction to the doxology. So if from this corner of hecklers down here, you happen to hear, praise God from, you'll know it's coming. Just join in and I will sit down. Wait a minute, David Campbell, don't start yet, I'm going to be It is good to be with you on this day of celebration of America's independence. It is called Independence Day with good reason. Our founders were willing to die for the right to control their own lives. They were not seeking war with the most powerful nation on earth in 1776. They were not attempting to tell King George III how the English should behave. They sought only self-determination. I am honored to have been asked to speak by the Friends of the Working Men's Institute, the University of Southern Indiana, and the New Harmony Kiwanis Club. When my friends Jeannie and Nathan approached me and asked me to speak today, they asked me to address issues surrounding the Revolutionary War. I think they thought I'd served in it. My war was a little different, a little later, folks. However, I do understand the desire to get a first-hand account of history. All of us wish we could ask our parents, or perhaps past heroes, what really happened. For example, wouldn't it be great to ask George Washington or James Madison what took place in those secret meetings with the windows shut, the doors locked, the news media out? What happened when they produced our Constitution? Well, for example, one of my personal heroes of New Harmony fame is Frances Mad Fanny Wright. That fighter for women's rights, black rights, and freedom from religion, who spoke here in New Harmony on July the 4th, 1828. How much we could learn if we could speak to Frances Wright today. And then I thought, well, we probably have somebody here who can tell us that. Charlie, you used to... Didn't you used to date Fanny? Well,
if she was around, I'd be right there.
Hold that thought. We'll talk about it over a hot dog at Brewer Park. Another of the great independence-type questions those of us privileged to live in Posey County have often pondered is, why did Father George Rapp's religious community last from 1814 to 1825, but Robert Owen's atheistic Enlightenment commune only made it about 3 years from 1825 to 1828. So I started doing some research to get ready for today's talk with you all. And Jeannie Mullen had furnished me with this great little book, which is for sale downstairs, by the way, and about the 3 speeches that were given on July 4th here, one by Robert Owen. Well, one thing I found was the Rappites at their 4th of July, and this is a good idea, by the way, the Rappites in their 4th of July celebrations gave out free beer. However, Robert Owen, he's a great guy, I'm not trying to... Here's what he said in his speech. Here's what he told his followers, and I quote, "Abandon the use of spirituous liquors." Well, I guess we can live without sex, but not without beer. Control. Isn't that what matters most to all of us? The visceral need for the freedom to make our own choices is why on that day we proudly call Patriots Day, April 19, 1775, those embattled colonists fired the shots heard around the world. And in our current political climate, my friends, when Americans today get embroiled in political discussions, it sometimes feels as if everybody has the muskets ready. When I find myself surrounded by the competing political mini-balls, I try to remember to remind myself this is nothing new. Over the 200,000 or 300,000 years we Homo sapiens have been around, we have had certain basic needs: air, water, food, shelter, procreation. But there are two more needs that seem to be just as important: the right to control our own decisions, and unfortunately, the desire for each of us to try to control everybody else's decisions. As long as my opponents agree with me, I'm going to defend to the death their right to agree. However, occasionally people don't agree with me. It's hard to believe. And that's when conversations can rapidly turn to confrontation. If we get to talking about global warming, or immigration, or war and peace, or, as we all know, especially in our society today, who should or should not be President of the United States, if you come down on the wrong side of those issues, sometimes people are not as charitable as we would like. The right to control our own lives makes us smile. The desire to control other people's lives can lead to such things as vitriolic statements and sometimes even vicious interchanges in our public interactions. Sometimes the discussions may center on sexual assault and the Me Too movement, or hate crimes and Black Lives Matter, or even questions of war and peace. In the half a century or so that I've been involved in the law, I've dealt with many rape crimes. And of course, being male and being an adult male, I didn't quite understand it for a long time. I thought it was a crime of sex. Well, of course, it's not a crime of sex. It's a crime of loss of control. Rape is a terrible crime because victims lose their right to make their own decisions. And that is an incalculable loss and can lead to loss of confidence in our legal system, and bitterness besides. Lynchings are another loss by one group due to the group that decides to tell them how to live. Lynchings, such as the ones that we had here on our own courthouse campus on October the 12th, 1878, are a collective denial of a people's or group's right to make their own decisions. And if we deny groups that right, sometimes they will react badly and they might get aggressive. And there might be political correctness that comes back to haunt us. Wars of aggression, not constitutionally authorized war for national defense, are our country's intentional denial of another country's or people's right to independently determine their own destiny. One of the main causes of our country's post-World War II denials of the right of other countries to control their own lives are wars instigated by independent executive action without congressional authorization. We can each quickly cite evidence of such wars based on false premises and rash executive actions. I remember the first vote I ever cast, you had to be 21 to vote, first time I got to vote. And I voted for Lyndon Baines Johnson because he was not going to send American boys to fight in a foreign war. And being one of those American boys, I thought that was a good idea. And of course, as soon as I got him elected, I'm sure it was my vote that did it, as soon as I got him elected, he sent 20,000 troops to Vietnam, and we were embroiled there forever. George W. Bush used false intelligence reports that the Iraqis had weapons of mass destruction and that they were involved in 9/11 to lead us all into war in the Middle East, where we still are, and I fear we may always be. It reminds me of that famous folk singer. You folks may not remember the Weavers. The Weavers were actually kicked out of the country for being communists, and Pete Seeger was one of those great weavers. Well, when he came back, he happened to give one of the first concerts at Oklahoma State University in Stillwater when I was a freshman. I didn't know who the Weavers were, didn't care. It was a free concert. I was going. And anyway, he wrote a great anthem for the Vietnam generation, which is my generation. And that song was "Where Have All the Flowers Hung?" And you all may remember that. And he asked that question, when will we ever learn? When will we ever learn? Our founders' wisdom of placing the authority to wage war in Congress is that such a procedure keeps all of our citizens more closely involved in these grave decisions. And it requires much more careful deliberation when Congress is involved. Also, when we eliminated the military draft, I volunteered, by the way, so it's not that. We turned from a citizen Minuteman type military to a professional armed forces. Less ecumenical, in fact. Every American should feel the cost of going to war, and we would go to war less. And the draft was one of the things we should have kept, and perhaps we might have avoided more wars. It is too easy to hire professionals to go to war. If you got to go, you might want to rethink the situation. But with a professional standing military, the military never stands down. One of the good things we received from our British cousins and the ideals that Robert Owen's commune ascribed to were John Locke's Enlightenment principles, especially the separation of powers. Our great nation has survived great trauma, in large part due to our government's three separate and equal branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. And we lose sight of that sound principle at our peril. A couple of weeks ago, Peg and I attended a rodeo in Osage County, Oklahoma. That's where I got this fence. And when the rodeo started, 35 competing cowboys were out in the center of the arena holding a gigantic American flag. Each cowboy with one hand held the flag, with his other hand put his cowboy hat over his heart, stood at attention, while a cowgirl on horseback sang the national anthem. It was a great show. I loved it. And Peg and I stood at attention with our hands over our hearts because we were proud to be Americans and we were proud to be there. But it did make me think, what if I hadn't wanted to stand up? What if I hadn't wanted to put my hand over my heart? Could I do that? You're darn right I could do that. It made me think of 1972, the Olympics and fist in the air. It made me think of United States women's soccer team. You know, they don't put their hands over their hearts, at least some of them don't. Some of them do. Doesn't bother me. You know, do what they want. I put my hand over my heart. I assume that doesn't bother them. But it made me think of James Madison and the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. The First Amendment is the ultimate recognition of the importance of choice. Freedom of and freedom from religion. Freedom of speech and the freedom to petition our government, whether in writing or by demonstration. I am proud that when Peg and I hear the national anthem, we can stand up, or if we want to stand up for any other cause. I always like standing up for the Hallelujah chorus. And so that, of course, there's that really important song that everyone, I think, should stand up for. It's the Indiana University fight song. And we stand up for that. And I'm sorry, there are some misguided people here from Purdue, like Professor Schutte, who may not, but they can do as they wish. For some reason, that rodeo experience reminded me of what our soldier son Jim told us he observed when he visited the old Soviet Union before the wall came down and before he was sent to war in Iraq. Jim said when he happened to see other Americans in the old Soviet Union, he could pick them out immediately. Because in a crowd of people, some people would be smiling. Those would be the Americans. The Russians weren't smiling. And then the National Judicial College sent me to Ukraine in 2000 to teach Ukrainian judges. And they sent me to Russia in 2003 to teach Russian judges. And Peg was with me in Russia. And we took the underground, pretty impressive underground by the way, to the Onion Domes to see the Kremlin. Well, when we got on that train, Peg was wearing a lovely blue coat. I was wearing a bright red ski jacket. Everybody else on that train had a dark coat, dark hat, and a dark face. Nobody was smiling. Well, Peg and I are pretty happy. So she looks at me and I look at her and we smile and we realize we're the only ones smiling. And that's when it hit me. Well, why are we smiling? We're smiling because we get to make those choices. We're Americans. We're free. Not so much with the Russians, no matter what Mr. Putin says. Anyway, I think we can keep smiling as long as our friends and fellow citizens respect our opinions. And they will keep smiling back at us as long as we respect their right to their opinions. Uh-oh. I hear the peanut gallery softly humming their solid. Okay, folks, thank you very much. And maybe I'll see you later at McClure Park. And we'll just ask Charlie about Mad Fanny and what it was really.
Another tough act to follow. However, We are fortunate to have two pieces of original music that we will next present. And the composer of one of these pieces is recounting, who will accompany us on the dulcimer. And the words to the refrains of both of these pieces are on the back of your program, and we ask that you please join in singing. Our final selection is entitled simply New Harmony. And our friend Mickey Grimm wrote this for the choir to sing at the bicentennial celebration. And every year I get a text from him asking if we're going to sing it again, and of course we are.
It sings me home to the town.
not just mine. It's not just yours. It's our home, our very own. It's all our hometown. New harmony, new harmony, new harmony. Indiana, it sings to me, it breathes in me, it will always be the only home for me. New harmony, Indiana. New harmony, New harmony, Indiana.
Welcome, everyone. This is a very exciting day for me. This is something that we have done for now going on 10 years, and I'm here representing Tri Kappa and also Kiwanis. My name's Diana Simpkins, and Dan Garten is the president of the Kiwanis, and he's probably flipping hamburgers somewhere. So first, let me give you a little bit of background information about who we are, what, when, where, and why this committee was formed. Looking around this small community, we saw many people of all ages, very busy helping in their community. We saw people gardening, pulling weeds, working in various organizations, and just being there to help each other with a smile and a pat on your back. So in January 2009, a group of very visionary folks decided to develop guidelines and objectives to honor an outstanding member in this community of New Harmony. These 4 people, 2 from Tri Kappa and 2 from Kiwanis, would use the nomination forms from the community to select a community volunteer, which would be celebrated at this annual 4th of July celebration. Each year the selection is so very difficult. We have great community volunteers in this small town. Well, today we're honoring such an individual. This individual has contributed to numerous different benefits at the American Legion, which she has served for 30+ years. She volunteered at the Holy Angels Church for many years, including the Coons Fest pork chop dinner. I know, I worked with her. She serves at the local town food bank. She not only does great things in her community, but she also helps in her home by taking care of others. One of the greatest assets of hers is her friendliness and offering a kind word to all. It gives me great pleasure today to honor the outstanding community volunteer of 2019, Rose Wilkinson.
appreciate everything. I appreciate everybody working together in New Harmony. Lois, I don't know what to say.
You're well deserved.
Thank you, everybody.
That is one shock volunteer. Let us pray.
Almighty God, giver of all good things, we thank you for the natural majesty and beauty of this land. We thank you for the great resources of this nation. We thank you for the men and women who have made this country strong. We thank you for the torch of liberty which has been lit in this land. We thank you for the faith we have inherited in all its rich variety. Help us, O Lord, to finish the good work here begun. Strengthen our efforts to blot out our ignorance and prejudice, to abolish poverty and crime, and hasten the day when all our people, with many voices, in one united chorus, will glorify your holy name. Amen. Amen.
By the way, this coffee's here to go grab one. Thank you all. Please join in to the golf cart parade. Come to McClure Park for our community picnic, and we'll see you in 2020.
Happy Independence Day.